My name is Connor Klecker, and I'll be moderating today's session for INTLC. How has mentoring shaped your career? This is going to be a panel discussion organized by the IT Mentoring Group, facilitated by David Parter, a member of our steering committee. And with that, please take it away, David.
Good morning. There we go. Good morning. It's a panel discussion, but we also want you guys to participate. And the title's a little misleading. How has mentoring shaped your career? It's really how has mentoring shaped your career and how is mentoring important and what can we all learn from it and why we should all get involved. And I'll introduce myself very briefly. If you don't know me, I'm David Parter. I'm the IT Director for Computer Sciences, and I've gotten involved in a bunch of things on campus. And I'll just ask my panel to introduce themselves.
Can we do this? Sure. Okay, awesome. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Todd Schechter. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I serve as Chief Technology Officer for our campus. I've been at UW-Madison for just a hair over 5 years right now, and thank you all for being here.
I'm Christina Stefonik. I work for the Office of Human Resources in Learning and Talent Development, and I facilitate courses. So if you've ever taken any of the Fully Prepared to Lead courses, I facilitate in that program. Also some of the Thrive at UW-Madison courses as well. I do design of online modules, and that includes a self-guided mentoring course. If anyone's interested, I'll share more about that later. And that work in mentoring also involved partnering with a lot of the mentoring programs across campus, which there are many, and starting to understand what are the resources for employees on campus if they want to get involved in mentoring. And so part of that was to develop a web page as well that's on our Office of Human Resources website. And so I'm happy to be here today.
Hi, I'm Lisa Jansen. I'm the IT director for the School of Education, and I also co-direct a unit called Merit in the school. I've been there for about 3 years. For 25 years before that, I was in the College of Letters and Science.
Okay, I'm going to start off by asking each of you to tell us a little bit about how mentoring, as either a mentor or a mentee, has been part of your career and professional journey.
Sure.
This one?
Yeah. Sure. It's still on, yeah. So just to start, I'll say that this has been a really great opportunity to reflect on mentoring in my career because it's not something that I've thought a lot about. And what I realized is that it's been a thread through my entire career, maybe more so in my early career. And I would say that I would not be here today without mentoring. And when I say that, I mean mentoring with a capital M, formal mentoring programs, as well as little m mentoring. I picked up 2 mentors because I sat next to them on a plane. So you can find mentors everywhere, and I just can't imagine being here without them.
Thank you. I was going to say similar, that many of my mentors have been little m, thanks for that term. In other words, informal mentors, but I've also had some formal mentors in my career, and I've had the privilege of mentoring others as well. I've had some informal mentors who I've worked with every day. We did some work together, we shared resources, we reflected together and all of those sorts of things. And I've also had mentors who I've met with on and off through my career, where maybe we talk every couple of years when I need something or want to talk through something with them. I've also had mentors who were my supervisors. So again, it wasn't a formal mentoring relationship, but maybe it was it became that over time after having worked together. And I have been part of a lot of peer mentoring groups throughout my career, which have been extremely valuable learning experiences for me, having people to be thinking partners with, where we do some learning together, we implement those things, we come back together, reflect on how it went, and hear from each other. So there's a lot of value that I've found in peer mentoring communities. I've also had opportunities, like I said, I've had the privilege to mentor others, and some of those were informal relationships in terms of having some really clear expectations set and having really specific roles that we had in those mentoring relationships. And I've also had some informal mentoring relationships with mentees where someone's reached out and said, hey, I'm interested in learning about your career path because I'd like to do something similar. Or someone that I've worked with who was a new employee in my area and how I could support them and those sorts of things. So I've really had a lot of different types of mentoring relationships throughout my career. And as you said, it's been nice to have that opportunity to reflect on what is mentoring. And I have a pretty broad perspective on what is mentoring.
Thank you, David. And David, thank you for this question as well. When I was thinking about this, very similar to what my colleagues said, but the two words that stuck out to me were constant and continuous. And that mentoring doesn't have to start, it doesn't have to stop, but it's any time that you have an opportunity to have a conversation with someone, both to ask for advice, but also to give advice and to give back to the community. I think sometimes, as I've seen folks that have been part of formal mentoring programs, they get a ton of value in that because it's hard to ask for advice. Sometimes it can be really hard to ask for help. But I'm thankful on our campus that we do have so many different mentoring opportunities where you can be part of a community, be part of a program, and learn from the experiences of others. When I think back to some of the folks that have been mentors for me, they've been folks not only within IT, but also within different parts of our university, whether that's a researcher, whether that's someone in governance, whether that's someone who's an instructor. For me, those have been just amazing opportunities to ask questions, to hear their perspective. We heard from Laura this morning about the 3 lenses, and to hear the lenses that each of those folks bring to us, and that can help inform the decisions that we have to make, the projects that we're working on, the strategies that we choose to employ, but being part of this amazing campus community.
Okay, so thank you. This question is kind of a continuation. How would you explain mentoring to someone who doesn't know what it is or thinks they know, but we've been tossing this word around? What is mentoring?
Sure, I'll start. Okay. I think for me, it's an ear to listen. It's an ear that if someone has a conversation with you, you have a chance to listen and then to provide some sort of response, some sort of feedback, some sort of feed forward. Sometimes it's sharing experiences, again, bouncing ideas, bouncing scenarios. How would you approach this? How would you handle this situation? What would you do in this case? And then kind of sharing historical perspectives as well. Maybe that's explaining the why or explaining the how, but helping each other through dialogue, through discussion, and how each of us could approach whatever the situation is at hand.
I wrote down a quote to help me explain or define mentoring. I really like this one. It says, mentoring is a learning relationship involving the sharing of skills, knowledge, and expertise between a mentor and a mentee through developmental conversations, experience sharing, and role modeling. The relationship may cover a wide variety of contexts and is an inclusive two-way partnership for mutual learning that values differences. I found that definition from the organization called EMCC Global. It's a global organization that has competencies that they put out for both coaching and mentoring, and they actually provide some certifications in those areas. I really like this definition because it's focused on learning. It's this sharing between, it doesn't say to, it doesn't say from, it says inclusive, two-way partnership, mutual learning, and values differences. And I think it really encompasses all these different ways that mentoring can look. Like you said, it's these dialogues, these conversations, but they're going to look different based on what the needs are of those in that mentoring relationship. Sometimes mentees need the mentor to be a listener. Other times they need someone to ask them some coaching questions, or, they may need someone to share resources with them, provide some advice. But there isn't, one right way. It's going to look different, like I said. So there are different models too, I think, when I think about mentoring. So I mentioned the peer mentoring as a model of mentoring where mentors, sometimes colleagues, or just have other types of roles, but they're similar, are working together to mentor each other. Maybe sometimes they're being the mentee, sometimes they're the mentor, and kind of the roles may shift in that sort of relationship. There's also dyad mentorship, which is it's more kind of what you might think of initially when you think of mentorship, where there's a mentor and a mentee, and those roles are pretty set. And there is group mentoring, where maybe there are multiple mentees with one mentor, or multiple mentors with one mentee. In other words, like I said, there are lots of ways that mentoring can work and can look depending on what the needs are. All of those types of relationships, I think, share some essential elements, and these come from the EMCC Global organization that I shared, and also from right here on campus. We have an amazing group called CIMER, C-I-M-E-R, which is the Center for the Improvement of Mentored Experiences in Research. I always had to write that down because that's hard for me. But this organization is really great. They do research on mentoring and what are the best practices in mentoring. What are some of these essential elements that you need to have in a mentoring relationship? And they're really focused on research mentoring in the research community on campus, but I definitely think that those elements apply beyond that community in career mentoring as well. And some of those big ideas that they share that really support the best partnerships are self-development, awareness of who you are, how your values, your interests, your beliefs are impacting that mentoring relationship. It's really about kind of identifying what are your values before going into that mentoring relationship, kind of supporting what are the goals that you have, thinking about that. Relationship building, Laura really talked a lot about this morning, this idea that building that relationship is not just that first coffee that you have, it's that constant check-in, how's it going? Maybe your mentor has said, I got to cancel the last 3 of the times that you set to meet. And I've got to check in again and say, hey, what is the best cadence for us to meet? And is there a time that would work better so that we can make sure that we are able to meet? This can change over time, right? It depends on what your needs are. Another one of the elements that CIMER talks about is this idea of outcome and action orientation, that mentorship should have some sort of a goal focus, that you have some goals that you're talking about as the mentee shares what those are. And this is kind of where the mentor can wear a lot of different hats. They can be a coach and ask those questions. They can kind of support them in saying, this is how I see you progressing on your goal. They might provide some advice. They might listen to you talk through how you are thinking about your goal. And then leaving some space in those conversations for autonomy, and giving some space for the mentee to also think through what they want to do to meet their goals. And then the last element that I'll mention is professional development. So a mentor can promote professional development for a mentee, and this is the area that I work in. I use professional development really broadly. So really specific training experiences can be professional development. It can also look like, are there opportunities in your work to try out some of those skills that you're working on? And it can look like, I'm going to connect you with someone else who I know is an expert in this area. So supporting professional development in whatever way that the mentee is needing to meet their goals. So those are the big essential elements that I think about when I think about defining mentoring.
Thank you. I'm going to try really hard not to repeat anything that you said and try to add some new information. So when I thought about this question, I didn't look up a definition, and instead I wanted to create a definition from my experiences of being a mentor, but also being mentored. And what really came through for me were two concepts, and one is showing the way and the other is paving the way. And so early in my career, one of the ways that mentors functioned was to help show the way that I might follow in my career. All I knew is I didn't want to go into advertising, and that's what my degree said on paper. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And my mentors really showed me different paths that I could follow that I didn't know existed, that didn't exist, because as we all know, IT is something fairly new. At least it was when I graduated, and guidance counselors didn't know about it. And how else would you learn about career paths other than from mentors and other people who were walking some of those same paths? Another way they showed the way is they showed me how to do things. So there were skills that I needed to learn, and they showed me. And I think in that way, that's how mentoring might be a little bit different than coaching. Because they were actually sitting down with me, doing something with me, showing me how to do something. So those are two ways that my mentors have showed the way, and that I try to show the way for people that I'm mentoring. And then the other thing that they did, my mentors, was pave the way. And so some of you might remember Steve Krogel and Carol Turner. They used to be in academic technology, at least for the purposes of this story, when they were both in academic technology. They, unbeknownst to me, nominated me for the More Leaders program at a time when nobody outside of DoIT was participating in the More Leaders program. And because of them, I got to be the first person from distributed IT to go through the More Leaders program. And we've heard more come up several times already today, what a transformative experience that can be and has been for me. Because of my mentors paving the way, I got to have that experience. Another way my mentors have paved the way is by creating opportunities and connections for me. So what that looked like was Reed Gilligan nominating me for my first shared governance committee. I served on the Professional Development and Recognition Committee, thanks to Reed. Thanks to Bruno Browning, I served on my first search committee, which was the search for the COO of DoIT that resulted in the hiring of John Krogman. So I can give you all kinds of examples of the ways that my mentors have paved the way for me.
Thank you. I'm just going to add, as the facilitator, I'm not really part of the panel, but I'm going to add one more element of mentoring, which doesn't always apply. In some situations it isn't, but I think it's critical. Mentoring is a safe relationship. I am mentoring a young hockey official. I also ref hockey when I'm not doing computer stuff. And he can tell me all his frustrations. And then I can help him turn that into positive of how are you going to move forward? How are you going to tell this to your partner who you're frustrated with, or the assigner? How are you going to tell them what kind of games you want? So it's a safe space for that conversation about what's going badly or what's going well, or things he doesn't understand. And I think that's really important in mentoring, is that you understand that relationship. Now, if you're a supervisor and you're mentoring an employee, that's a little bit different. That's not the safe space necessarily to blow off steam and complaints about your supervisor. But it's important that you understand that relationship, and safety and confidentiality is part of that. And now, without violating any confidentiality, I'm going to ask you each to tell us a little bit about one of your mentors and that relationship and impact on your career. You want to start, Lisa?
Sure. Thanks. So I'm going to pick my mentor from when I was a student hourly employee working at the Wisconsin Union. I mention this because many of us have the opportunity to supervise student hourly employees, and it can be such an important part of their learning experience. My mentor was Kathy Kruschke. She was the manager for all of the retail operations at the Wisconsin Union, and I was her lead student employee for 3 years. Kathy involved me in every single decision she made as manager for the retail operations. She involved me in all hiring, performance management, firing. Maybe we couldn't do that today with a student, but she did back then. Budgeting, all of the purchasing of the things that we sold throughout the year, working with vendors. And I mentioned that when I graduated, I knew I didn't want to go into advertising, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I stumbled into this IT career. I had the opportunity to create the first statewide help desk for UW Cooperative Extension, and I was able to do that because of that experience that I got as a student employee at the Wisconsin Union. I knew how to hire people and supervise people. I knew how to manage a budget. I knew how to do all of that because somebody took the time to show the way and show me how to do that. And again, my whole career wouldn't have happened without that.
I had a mentor who was one of my supervisors. So this was a relationship where it was a formal relationship in terms of our roles. He was my supervisor and I was an employee. And then over time, again, it kind of became a mentoring relationship as well. And so this supervisor really took on that mentoring role in helping me to see what I kind of, helping me think about my goals, helping me think about what I could do with those goals, how I could meet them and those different things. And so I tried to frame this in those different elements that I was talking about earlier. So when I think about, the first one was self-development. So he was great at asking open-ended questions for me to think about, kind of like, how do you think that went? Or you have some skills in this area. How might you share those at the leadership meeting coming up? Those sorts of things to kind of help me to see things in myself that maybe I didn't see. He was great at relationship building. This is the piece, where you kind of leave some space to understand the other person and then get to know them as well. And, he would ask me about how's work going and things like that. But also, what are you doing with your family for Thanksgiving? And it's important to have both of those pieces, right? So he actually supervised over 30 people, and I still knew him well enough to know that he grew all of his herbs in his garden from seed, except for cilantro. So this is what I mean. He was very good at bringing that warmth, bringing that openness into the mentoring relationship as well. So you felt valued as a person and seen and like you belonged. In terms of that outcome and action orientation, so it's similar to what I was saying about the self-development, where he'd ask me, how did that go? But also helping me to think about, what are my goals? What are the goals that I want to pursue? And you'd always focus on those in our conversations and check in on them with me. And then, say, how do you see your progress going? What do you think we could do differently? And this is what I see you doing well. And then promoting professional development was really, really great. He supported me in doing a ton of different professional development experiences, formal training kinds of things. Also providing the structure so that I had a team of people that had mentors kind of built into it as well. So I was learning by on the job as well in terms of professional development. And then those reflective conversations, those are also part of professional development. That mentorship is a huge piece of it. So I had tons of experience and opportunity for growth in terms of professional development as well. And I can't say enough about how this mentorship experience impacted me and also set the stage for how I want to show up for others as well.
So when I think about different mentors, and there was one that I wanted to tell a little story about, similar to other folks here. It was an individual who at the time wasn't my supervisor, became my supervisor at my previous institution, and her name was Dr. Sherry Pancake. She tells the story that before her husband passed away, his name was Flip Pancake. I kid you not, this is completely true. But Sherry was a computer science faculty member, And she ran a very large research computing group at Oregon State University, where I worked previously. And what I learned from Sherry was how research worked and how the research mission of the university worked. Her research group, they focused on human-computer interaction. And so how do we as humans interact with computers, with web browsers, with different types of web browsers? Their research group has moved on to modeling climate data, and that's kind of what they focus on now is climate data. But I learned so much about what it means to be in the research mission of the university, how you apply for grants, how competitive they are, how you offer services, how you offer shared infrastructure and shared services, how you take feedback from others. And I just, I can't thank her enough for having that year where I could ask questions. And I could ask questions about funding agencies. What does it mean to get a grant for the National Science Foundation? What does it mean to have a project or a program manager that you have to report results to? And for me, that was so beneficial because I understood the faculty perspective. And I began to understand the faculty perspective and the pressures that our faculty members are under as they're working to build their research program, as they're working to kind of climb the tenure ladder and to prove to others in their area that they've got what it takes to be tenure. That is a major stressor for our faculty members. And I will always think back upon those days of being able to have Sherry to ask questions of, to have discussion with, and to really learn from her and learn from her experiences. As time kind of went on, Sherry became my manager. She became my supervisor, and then I ultimately replaced her when she retired. But I'll always look back upon those opportunities and the meetings that Sherry invited me to, the budget meetings that she invited me to, teaching performance evaluation, teaching strategy, thinking about how we work with our vendors in IT and how we think collectively as a university, as a college, about how we work with our vendors. I'll always be very grateful. I will always be very grateful for the time that she took out of her day to invest in me. And now I think about that time that I have to invest in others and to kind of give back to the community based on all of the mentoring that Sherry took time to give to me.
Okay, I'm going to combine this all in one. How did you find your mentors? How did your mentors find you? How did you find the people you have mentored, or how did they find you? How did you make that connection?
I can start with this one. So I think the three of us have talked a bit about that relationship that we've had with our manager, our supervisor, and how we've worked to build that relationship. I'll say, though, that for me at this point in my career, I'm actively looking for people that, hey, would you like to spend a half hour together? Would you like to spend an hour together? It seems like you're working on something. Maybe it's something that we could do together. Maybe it's a conversation that we could have together. That's outside of a formal mentoring program, but that's observing things in a conference, observing things in meetings, observing things in the way that we work together, and then reaching out and saying, hey, would you like to get coffee? Would you like to meet at Union South? Would you like to get a beer after work? That kind of thing. I think that people really appreciate that when you go out of your way to extend an open hand, to extend an invitation. And I think that that is particularly important when we are working in a hybrid or a virtual working space, where we don't see each other in the hallway like maybe we did at one point in time, where we don't have the opportunity to see each other at quote unquote at the water fountain. I miss that a lot. I miss running into people in the hallways like maybe we did 5 years ago. And so I think it's kind of all of our responsibility to look for those folks that we might be able to extend a hand to and say, hey, would you like to get that cup of coffee? Would you like to have a conversation about this project that we're working on together? Is there something I can do to help? Is there something I can do to answer a question, provide context? And that may or may not fit the formal definition of mentoring, but it's kind of how I think of mentoring these days. And really being there for others and paying it back, just like how Sherry kind of contributed to my career. So I don't know, David, if I'm answering your question or not, but that's a perspective and a reaction I'd share.
In terms of how I found mentors or how I found mentees or how they found me as well, I think about how there have been people in my life who've made me feel valued, and they've just kind of seen me and understood me. And there have others who I've worked closely with for years, and they never seem to quite get me or see me. And so when I've met someone who's seen me, right? They've made room for me. I can tell that they value me. Those are the people that I have grabbed onto as my mentors, kind of kept them with me over time. And those can be informal mentoring programs. They can also be in other roles in your life that you meet them. And so I've mainly found my mentors, like I said, by keeping them or holding on to the people who I've seen as role models and who I see understand me. And then I also hope to be intentional about creating that kind of an experience for those who I mentor as well, where I want them to feel seen and heard and valued, and feel like they can ask me to be their mentor, or to, do you want to meet for coffee, or can you just share a little bit about your work, or whatever it is. I'll mention how I found one of my first mentors was a former colleague of mine. So we were colleagues by default. We didn't necessarily have a program that we were built into or anything like that. But over time, I could tell she was an expert in the work that she was doing, and I was new in my career, and she was really open to the ideas that I was sharing. She was sharing all these great ideas with me, and so this didn't require necessarily a formal mentoring agreement where we said, this is your role, this is my role, these are the expectations, because they were built in. The expectations for working together were built in, but I just kind of kept listening to her and asking questions. Like you said, whatever you can ask to find out more about when you find someone who is a mentor for you, and just kind of hearing as much as I can and learning from her. Another one of my mentors was a supervisor who kind of showed me all the different ways, the strengths that I had, and also taught me a lot of things about the way that they did their work and modeled things for me. And so again, it wasn't a mentorship program, but it was a formal mentoring relationship. Another mentor that I met, I was in school and I was really interested in her work. And so I reached out to her, and over time we have continued to connect. I still text her or call her probably every year and say, hey, this is something that I'm thinking about doing. What are your thoughts about this? And then she helps me think through it. I have a mentor who we were colleagues in a totally different type of career. We're in really different work now, but it's interesting. We had done this one type of thing, and now we're in another thing that's really similar. And so we connect every month, and we just say, hey, we're peer mentors. We say, this is what I'm thinking about. What are you thinking about? And our thought partners. So again, we just reached out to each other because we had built that relationship in a former career. In terms of mentees, I had several mentees, or have had several mentees in a really formal structure that I've worked with. And so those were set up for us. And it was something that I said, hey, this is something I want to do. I signed up for it, right? It wasn't necessarily something that just happened. I signed up for those experiences where I would have mentees. And in other situations, new employee comes on our team, and we develop a mentoring relationship just organically. So it kind of depends, again, on all the different ways that you can find mentors and mentees. Some of those group or peer mentorship experiences I talked about, those have kind of been both a mix of things that I signed up for and things that happened through working together already. But in general, like I said, it's finding those people who understand you. And sometimes that can be a match through a formal mentoring program. And sometimes it's an informal relationship that becomes a mentoring partnership.
I want to go back to some things that Todd mentioned about how hard it is now with so many of us working remotely and not having those hallway conversations, how we have to make a little bit more effort to initiate those things. And when I think about how I found my mentors early in my career, they all found me. There's no way I would have had the courage to go up to somebody and say, will you be my mentor? I'm not even sure I knew what a mentor was to be able to ask for one. So it wouldn't have happened without people initiating the mentoring relationship. And I think, like you said, Todd, it may be even more difficult now that we are not all having those chance encounters face to face with each other. So those of you who are in a position to mentor, I would encourage you to initiate those conversations if you're not already. And in terms of being mentored, it's, you know, you can't look at somebody on this campus without seeing at least one mentor. Like, there are lots of mentors in this room, and the challenge is connecting mentors with mentees. So that's where formal programs can be really helpful. So I'm really glad that we have those available. I think had those been available earlier in my career, I would have really appreciated that. And thank goodness other people stepped forward in the absence of those formal programs.
Okay, so this is a leadership conference. What do you see as the role of mentorship and leadership? How are they related?
I think it's a responsibility of leadership. So again, I'll go back to managing student employees. I think it's part of our students' learning experiences, the jobs that they have on campus, and so we can all be teachers and we can all be mentors to the students that we work with. I also think for those of us who have been around for a while, and like I've spent my whole career at UW-Madison, we have a real vested interest in growing the next generation of leaders and the next generation of staff. And again, student employees can be a great pipeline for staff. And the people that we supervise are going to be the leaders of our units in the future or of our campus in the future. So I mentioned when I was in UW Extension, I had the opportunity to create a help desk. And so the very first employee that I hired for that help desk was a student. And they were a student in curriculum and instruction in the School of Education. So not looking like they were headed for a career in IT, but I hired that person and worked with that person, and I can't at all take credit for this person's career because I left Extension a few years after he was hired, but that person was Greg Joel, who just recently retired as the director of that unit, my former unit in Extension. And so it really is worthwhile to invest the time in mentoring our more junior staff, and it just helps all of us. And so I do see it as a responsibility of leadership.
Thank you. As a leader and mentor, I think a huge responsibility of that, as you're saying as well, is to be able to listen to what someone's needs are. And this is the tricky part because it's mentoring, but avoiding the advice monster. It doesn't mean avoiding advice altogether, but avoiding the advice monster where you're not really listening to the needs and just sharing advice. So thinking about how do you balance that a little bit? Where are they asking for advice? You know, where are you able to help them kind of come to their own ideas about meeting their goals and things like that, and kind of helping them figure out where they want to go in order to meet those goals. Another thing about mentorship and leadership is that we need mentors throughout our career, as you mentioned, including when we're leaders, formal or otherwise. For example, I had a mentee one time who I didn't always know how to support, and I would get stuck. And then I would reach out to my mentor at the time and say, hey, how could I better support this mentee? And they would help me think through this situation. So we need mentors throughout our career. And something else that I think about in terms of leadership is that you don't have to be a mentor or a mentee. You can be both. And you can be supporting others while you're also providing, or you're also finding someone to support your thought partnership. This is kind of the beauty of that definition that I shared earlier, that it's this two-way learning experience. I was in a meeting yesterday about AI and mentorship and how they're connected. And it was just a great reminder that mentors don't have to know all the answers. And as a leader or a mentor, it can be an opportunity to learn together with a mentee or a group of mentees about how to move forward. Maybe how are you thinking about AI? How is AI impacting your career? How should we be thinking about this together? What are the opportunities? So it doesn't have to be, this is how you should be thinking about things, right? So there's that piece of leadership where you kind of step back and allow the other person to bring in their ideas, their needs, their goals, and allowing them to think through how they might get there. Also, in terms of leadership, as you were saying, Lisa, I'll also mention, and I guess you were too, saying that mentorship takes time. It's an investment in time, and it can be hard to come by time as a leader. And as Erla Haynes, she's the dean and provost of UW Libraries, who has done a lot of work in the area of mentoring. She said this in a really beautiful way at the Women in Leadership Conference last year, and I'm not going to say it as beautifully as she did, but mentoring is part of a culture of support and caring for others in your organization. So it's not something you have to do. Instead, it's a way to contribute to this culture of belonging and building of everyone in the organization. And so we have this opportunity at UW-Madison to be a part of this and to create this type of culture of mentoring at UW-Madison.
Thank you. When I thought about the answer to this question, or my perspective on this question, kind of what came to mind for me was that mentorship builds leaders. And for me, it's all about what do I see as kind of my legacy, and what would I like to leave behind? What would I like to give back to the university? And again, I think about mentorship builds leaders. And who are the people kind of during my career, throughout my career, that I've had the chance to mentor and to see how that's went for them. When I think back to some of the students that I've had the opportunity to mentor, and I really appreciate the student hourly example, student worker example. One of those students now runs Rackspace, founded Rackspace. The other founded the Mozilla Project. Both of these started out as student employees working 10 to 15, maybe a few, maybe more, maybe a little less hours per week in an IT group at a university in rural Oregon, somewhat rural Oregon. Seeing that spark though, seeing the interest that they had in IT, going out of your way to make time for them. All of our schedules are busy. Going out of your way though to make time for them, to answer their questions, to provide opportunities, that's what builds leaders. Not everyone's going to go on to be the CEO of a big organization or to start up an amazing open source application, but it's all of our responsibility, I think, to give back to the organization, to give back to those who we have the opportunity to work with and to be around. And I think that kind of similar to, as others have said, I think that leaders at all levels of the organization need mentors. It doesn't matter where you are in the organization, all of us benefit from mentors. Those may look differently, the relationship may look differently, but all of us need someone that we can reach out to have that conversation, to ask that question, to use the 4 I's that Laura talked about earlier today, to kind of benefit all of us together.
Okay, I'm going to go a little off script again.
That's not allowed.
Is there anything you want to ask the other panelists, or anything you want to follow up on?
Were you a student hourly in your career?
I was, yeah. So I started out as a student worker. That's how I kind of made my way up through the IT program. I began at Oregon State University working in a computer lab. At the time, these computer labs were open 24 hours a day, and as a new student worker, you were required to work an overnight shift. Your choices were midnight to 4 a.m. or 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. Some people know I'm a morning person. I chose 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., but that's how I got started. And that's how I started to meet people. I met a faculty member who taught a multimedia class. This was back when like multimedia and having audio and video together was very unique and very different. But I never would have had that start, though, without starting as a student hourly employee and getting to know George Beekman, who was the faculty member who taught in the computer lab, that it was my job to get the computer lab ready for him in the morning so that he could come in and be successful teaching Computer Science 391, Introduction to Multimedia. That was really formative for me, though, and yeah, I don't know where I would have been without that kind of experience.
We do have a couple questions from the Zoom, and you guys can all use the microphones there because these are being used right now. But from the Zoom, Tyler Radikowski asked, "Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives this morning. I've often reflected how mentoring includes an element of sponsorship, actively supporting and advocating for individuals within the relationship. How has sponsorship influenced your career growth?"
The thing that came to mind with that question was something from one of the more leadership sessions on improv. And I remember the activity that we had to do was conveying expertise, I think is what it was, onto another person. And so we practiced introducing somebody to a group of people and playing up their expertise in something. So the partner that I was paired with happened to know about fencing. And so I got to introduce her as an expert, an experienced expert in fencing. And I learned from that exercise how important it is for somebody that a group already trusts and knows to make that introduction to a group for another person. And so when I think of sponsorship, I think that's what you're doing. You're lending your name to that person. You're vouching for their expertise. You're giving confidence in that person in a way that would be hard for that person to do by themselves.
Yeah, and Lisa, when I thought about the question, it also brought back a more example to me. And that's this idea that if Lisa and I are standing at a table just like the ones out here, and we see a third person come up that one of us knows, but maybe the other doesn't, that's an opportunity for us to effectively sponsor that person and bring them into the conversation. Invite them, maybe it's Tomomi. Tomomi doesn't know Lisa. I know Tomomi. Hey, Tomomi, would you like to join us? Would you like to be part of the conversation? Maybe it's Sakai. Sakai doesn't know Tomomi, etc. But I don't know, I thought that was, Tyler, when you asked that question, that was kind of the first reaction that came to me is maybe I know someone that somebody else doesn't, and I can bridge that gap and bring those folks to the conversation.
Yeah, I think mentorship and sponsorship have differences and they can blend together a lot. I think about different mentors who I've had in my career who, as you were explaining, Lisa, had, they were very well respected. And so then when they introduced me to others, I immediately had some connection with those people already. If they are vouching for me, that helps so that I can then make those relationships myself. And similar to what you're saying as well. I mean, even, when you think about conferences, when someone recommends you for something, and when you invite someone else to something, you are sponsoring them and saying, hey, this person would be great for this role. It can be a project, it can be a conference, it can be a position. All of those things involve sponsorship if someone is sharing or giving you that voucher, I guess is the term for it.
Any questions from the audience? Yeah?
I think you all briefly touched on this, but I was wondering what specific qualities do you look for in a great mentor, and what specific qualities do you look for in a great mentee?
I'll start. I think trust is where I would start. If I'm thinking about someone who I might consider to be a mentor, I would like that to be someone who is respected, who is transparent, who I feel like I have a trust relationship with, because I might like to have a conversation with them that is difficult. Or I would like to know that that conversation can stay between the two of us and it's not going to end up being shared with others. So I think the first thing that came to mind for me was having that really healthy two-way trust relationship with an individual.
Yeah, a lot of the research around mentoring talks about values and shared interests. So if you have shared values and shared interests, and I think that's a starting place. And then it's also that, do I feel like they're making me feel like they belong? Am I able to make this person feel like they belong? And then what else do we have? What as we build this relationship that connects us? And are we supporting each other? And if you can tell that that's the type of relationship that's building, then you know that that's going to be a positive mentorship experience. And sometimes it's you start as a formal match or something like that, and then later on you see, you know what, I'm looking for other things in this particular mentorship, and so I'm gonna move on and find a different experience that's going to support me. And so it can be really rewarding once you do find that person or those people that are supporting you and you're able to support.
I think maybe the number one quality in a mentee is curiosity, coming with questions, listening to the answers, thinking about things, and just being genuinely interested in learning. I think for a mentor, one of the best qualities is to be somebody who can put somebody else's best interests in front. So a mentor doesn't have their own agenda. It's really about the mentee's agenda.
One question?
Good morning. Speaking somewhat in generalization here, I think a lot of IT people are fairly hardwired to give advice and say, this is how you fix things. So kind of going back to Christina's comment of the advice monster, what are some of the tactics and strategies you use to decide when do I tell you to do something and when do I go more coach and asking questions?
Thanks for the question, Jason. Jason, right? Yes. Yeah. I just listened to this podcast recently and it really stuck with me. And what he was saying is that just stay curious a little bit longer. You know, we all have that where we want to jump in. Like, I think it comes from this place of empathy that we want to help someone when we want to give them advice. Like, oh man, I was there and I know how to do that because that happened to me and this is how it got fixed. We want to help somebody. And it's kind of a clue to ourselves to just pause and wait just a little longer, ask a few questions, try to understand, support them. And then, potentially they are looking for advice. And so maybe just waiting a little bit longer, staying curious a little bit longer before jumping in with advice. So I'm guessing many of us have experienced this where we've had someone who's telling us what to do. They're trying to problem solve and you just want them to listen because you want to talk through it yourself, but need someone to be there to listen. So balancing as you're asking questions, kind of getting the sense and even checking in with them. Like, do you want some advice right now? Are you looking for that? Would you like me to ask you some questions? Would you like me to share some experiences that I've had? Would you like me to share some resources? What are you looking for? And that's okay to ask that in a mentoring relationship as well.
I just want to echo that asking the question, which one do you want? Do you want advice or do you want coaching? I think is a really great way to stop that.
Jason, my only addition was going to be, I was thinking about if you're in that relationship, asking kind of second level questions that get beyond whatever the basic thing is, but that really drives at what's the root of the situation that we're working through. But yeah, totally like not wanting to be there to tell you how to do something, but helping you solve for it yourself or helping you work through the situation yourself. I see kind of our role with our experiences is like, I don't want you to fall off the deep end, but I want you to find the way that works right for you. And I want to save you from truly falling off that deep end, if that's the scenario. But I really think you have to grow yourself, and that you have to experience some of these things yourself.
Yeah, advising and then mentoring is like really two different things. I know like in us, like, we like to advise more, but I think mentoring is just like really, as you guys say, listening and then maybe like, work with them or work with the people actually. And then, yeah, I think that's a really great, like, statement. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank the panel. I think you did a wonderful job. And encourage you all to sign up for the IT mentoring program and to encourage everyone you know, encourage your staff, your colleagues to be mentors or mentees. Any last thoughts from the panel?
I'll just say, like, have fun. Ask questions, learn a lot, suck in a whole bunch of knowledge, but have fun. We just work at an amazing place, and there are so many people that want to give their time and want to give back to the community. So have fun and suck in a whole bunch of really good knowledge.
I'll just say, if you can reflect on what you need and how you can create a sense of belonging for others, then you are ready to participate in mentoring. And yeah, IT mentoring is a great program that you have access to. I love how, I think it was Lindsay who told me this, IT mentoring, you can participate if you're in an IT career, if you're IT adjacent, if you're IT interested. I loved how open that was. So yeah, if you are ready to participate, you've got a great opportunity right here.
I'll say again how much I enjoyed the opportunity to think about my mentors. I encourage all of you, if you haven't thought about that in a while, I bet you have had mentors. Think about what they did for you. Think about how that made you feel. Think about the doors that opened for you, and then go do that for somebody else.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all. We have more sessions coming up. Conversations good and hard. Gaining leadership through shared government. So let's all thank the panel.